President's Organization, and said while he was looking at this presentation, he had this idea that how can South Africa's visual artists document and reflect on this pandemic of the lockdown, and then how can we use that moment in history to generate funds that could sustain artists during lockdown. So he shared this with Lauren, and then I got this voice note on my WhatsApp to say, this is a fantastic idea, listen to this. And then she recruited me immediately to say, this would be a really wonderful opportunity to invite artists to be part of an initiative to record this moment in history. Now, what has been amazing is working with somebody who, Lauren Wolf is the founder and owner of Mrs. Wolf, which is an organization that does brand management and design. And she partners with Tanya de Jong, who's a fantastic and talented designer. And Carl works, is incredibly well networked. And then me as an artist and an arts educator, having a network of artists, that combination was just amazing. And we called ourselves the 48-hour team because within 48 hours, we had already asked Gordon Froud as to be the first artist of this collection, and with this idea that every day of the 21 days of lockdown, we would release an artist's voice, a visual voice. So that day I went straight away to William Kentridge and introduced the idea, and he immediately offered us a beautiful drawing that he called Where Do We Place Our Hope? And this became a quite symptomatic and a very important symbol of this project. Where do we place our hope? And the idea of where do we place our hope was very much in the artists themselves, to create opportunities for other artists. And this drawing was bought by a collector in the US for R500,000, which just secured a fund that we started, the Vulnerable Artists Fund, and that collector also wanted that part of that income to go to the President's Solidarity Fund. And from that moment, we invited artists who all were very enthusiastic and very keen to support. And Carl and Lauren managed to somehow underwrite every single artist's contribution within a minimum amount of 25,000 Rand. So by the time the end of the 21 days came, we took the work to auction, and each and every work was sold on auction, and the entire program managed to raise 2 million Rand, which was quite extraordinary. And I think the generosity, the energy, the passion of artists allowed us to create this fund, which 40% to part of it went to the artists, part to the Solidarity Fund, and part of it to the Vulnerable Artists Fund. And so we immediately, a month later, after 21 days, were able to start distributing funds to vulnerable artists. And I think we all know the kinds of conditions that people had to endure during lockdown without access to resources, food, abilities to make money. So this was a really amazing opportunity to be able to distribute a grant of 3,000 Rand to each applicant, and make a difference to those lives. And it was an ability of the agency of artists giving to other artists. And other artists came forward, and we decided when Ramaphosa extended the lockdown, we invited Gordon Froud to curate an extension collection, which represents the extension lockdown. And we kept the 21 days. And I think what made this collection quite extraordinary was every day that this came out, our colleagues and friends Pam Alara and Mark Auslander, who I see have joined this panel, wrote about every single artwork that was released each day, creating the most incredible profile for the collection and an international kind of networking. And so this collection, I think, went viral. And the idea about artists supporting artists, that idea was repeated over and over again. And I think that this lockdown collection has somehow made a huge difference. So where we at now is Gordon has curated this extension collection, which was again written about and partnered with Artist Proof and put on the Artist Proof website. And then I think the most exciting part of all of this has been the student responses. The student collection, I think, has really inspired me enormously. And Shannon, Renee and Heidi will talk a little bit about it, but the team at Artist Proof Studio, Shannon and Nati, and the supportive team has really created a home to support so many artists, people who have applied, the responses, the way of supporting the flourishing of the arts during this time. And I think when you get to see a little bit more about the lockdown collection in the slides and when you hear the students speaking, I think this is a time of real optimism and creativity and agency rather than, despair. And I think this is exactly where we need to place our hope in this generation of artists going forward. And so I think this whole collection has been an amazing demonstration of partnership, collaboration, passion. I think people who have come together as volunteers to work with us, to all join in a mission, everybody's just come together and made this happen. And that's been a real privilege, both as a teacher and as, as a facilitator of the arts. And so this is a very great opportunity. So I'm going to end there because I tend to go on, but I'd like to hand over to my colleagues to maybe talk a little bit more in depth about the collection and just say thank you, Rafiwa.
Thank you so much for that, Kim. Renee and Heidi, go ahead.
Heidi, do you want to start or should I start?
You can start and I'll follow.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So the student collection happened just after the TLC collection ended. And UJ APS asked their students to create works talking about the pandemic, COVID-19. And the student didn't have resources, they didn't have materials. This happened during lockdown, so they had to be very resourceful in terms of finding materials and expressing what they were feeling. And it became such a beautiful and hopeful collection to actually be part of. I don't know if Heidi wants to say more about the collection.
Well, I think for me as an educator, I think, and for the artists involved or the students, for the little one, well, not the little ones, they're not little, but for the students, it was a kind of we had to switch gears and switch lanes very, very quickly, and we had to adapt as an educator very, very fast and try using the resources that we had, because a lot of at Artist Proof Studio is centered around community and centered around press, and the space is very much about coming in and working together. Now suddenly we were all alone, and we had to think about how our students could now work with materials that were around them and really just go and fly. So there was a lot of challenges, I think, for our students but also in the challenges, they rose to the occasion with some incredibly powerful and sophisticated work that I think blew us all away with their expertise and having to just respond to this epidemic. And I think for me being the second year coordinator and trying to teach the students, we struggled a lot because our students don't have the luxury, particularly at APS, of maybe, and I would also think UJ is the same boat, that they don't have laptops, they don't have computers, they don't have Wi-Fi. And I mean, all around us, everybody's going private. They're kind of all having these wonderful Zoom meetings. But for us, we would just like, most of our students, some of them don't even have smartphones. So our educators had to, I mean, our managers were incredibly quick and were organizing. We were going to get smartphones for our students or get funding for smartphones. And then it was a case of how do we teach using a phone, a cell phone. And using the best of our abilities was using WhatsApp as a teaching platform. And we were very reliant on the groups to really just help us to communicate and to help talk to the students and to try guide them through voice notes or through messages. So really that was as an educator, how we were communicating with our students. A lot of the time it was scary as an educator because the social media creates quite a distance. People can leave their phones, you don't see the stuff, and then suddenly a couple of weeks later there's magic just popping up into your phone in pictures, and you're just like, okay, well, this is, you know, fantastic. So I think there was a lot of apprehension in just having to rely on social media, but at the same time the students really rose to the occasion and created some fantastic works that blew me away, you know, as an educator. Renee,
Yeah, and I think that we see that throughout the student collection, right? And some of those topics that you mentioned, elements of grief and displacement, of loneliness, and just sort of grappling with real life, right? Because at the center of this is that whilst there's this demand to be productive in a particular kind of way, we're still in a pandemic, and we're still in very real ways dealing with grief and navigating survival. So I'm wondering, for yourselves as educators, how were you balancing this creative process as well as caring for each other and for the students and their own process?
I think Renee, go.
It's been very challenging, like Heidi was saying. I mean, you get these stories, not stories, but real life things that students are going through, and we are kind of like the support that they have. And it's been very challenging trying to balance the two in terms of being a counselor and a teacher at the same time. But we've had support from Lefika Lapodiso, who are going to be counseling us in terms of how do we deal with the emotional and kind of issues that our students face during lockdown. I mean, we were supposed to open in July this month, and we stopped because of the rise in the cases. And I mean, to just keep carrying on and supporting them in terms of their work and being creative and innovative. We had to source out materials for them to come and fetch at the studio so that they can continue working. And it's been challenging, but it also at the same time, it opened a lot of new skills for us to learn and for them to actually learn. So,
and I think from my, just to answer that, I think that the students had to, or we had to switch lanes and gears, but I think it created a space for us to navigate. And I think this is a space that a lot of people can relate to, the idea of working from home and boundaries, and the idea that there is no kind of boundaries, and trying to get into a new routine with students. and navigating the space of a pandemic was just very kind of like, okay, we need to give them order, we need to give them deadlines, we need to be like the show must go on, and we have to carry on and create some normality, even if we're feeling quite displaced in all of this. We're going to make plan B, C, and D just to make sure that we're holding our students. We've got a very safety net for them, and that they know that they're not alone, that they know that they've got us, and we're there to support them as much as we can. So I think that was for us very, very important, and it was now I think a test. I've worked so hard, and I think all the teachers just, you hit the ground running, and it was like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do that, and just make sure that we can catch the students and hopefully provide them with opportunities to the best of our abilities to help in the situation. So I think that was just it was difficult. I was exhausted, tired.
Certainly. But I want to hear from the students who are in the room right now, and that's Angelique and Cynthia, whose work are featured in the Lockdown collection, the student collection. Cynthia, I'll start with you. Your work is focused on patriarchy and images of beauty. I was wondering if you can just share a little bit about your work and about your process in developing this work.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia. And so for my work, basically, I would like to believe that how I developed my work was mainly like under the pressure of the lockdown. And with this pressure, basically like really pushed me to create more like work. And for this one specifically, like being the perception and the misconceptions of beauty, having the beauty salons and all of these beauty areas that women go to make themselves feel beautiful and look beautiful, since they were like closed down due to the pandemic. So with this work, I wanted to mainly like focus on like within the spaces that we're in, also like taking time for reflecting upon everything that goes around us. And also at the same time, it reminded me of like when my family and I came to South Africa in 2006. And so just all of that together was like a motivation for like the creation of this work, basically. So having just like, I'm sorry, I'm just a bit.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think that the voices of women, particularly in the pandemic, are so important. And women occupy space in such different ways to men, and gender non-conforming people also occupy space in such different ways as well, where public space is not always a safe space, right? And the home is often not a safe space in itself as well. Why do you think this focus on women is so important right now for you?
For me, it's like from a personal view, and also from like the people that I know. So it's like with the pandemic on its own, it really pushed us to look within ourselves and work with ourselves and just like reflect. And because now the connection with like other people, like there wasn't like enough connection. It was just like over social media, and the person or like face-to-face connection wasn't there. And mostly we rely on that for support and for like learning and everything. So basically this one is also like the importance of like self as well, that I wanted to highlight on, especially of like women dealing with like different issues of appearance, of role, because like being the space of like within a home and different objects that automatically just associate women with a certain role or a certain look and stuff. So it was mainly on like reflecting on these roles and these issues, but from a personal perspective and just like evaluating that.
Thank you. And we can see that very beautifully through these gazes in the mirror, right? Which gaze are we speaking about? Is this the patriarchal gaze? Is it our own gaze? And when we have these intimate moments and these moments of interiority, what relationship do we have to ourselves? So thank you very much for presenting this work. Angelique, your work is also featured in the student collection. Your focus has been to highlight the voices of the poor and the marginalized in South Africa who often do not have access to a lot of the resources and opportunities and even just sort of basic needs such as water. So this idea of, oh, just wash your hands and do all of these things when we're living in a water-constrained society is somewhat of a challenge. Can you speak a little bit about your work and how was your own process in making this?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. So basically in my artwork, I wanted to identify each person as a warrior in their own capacity and particularly look at these individuals and see their strength to keep going on each day. So particularly in like remote villages and townships, access to water and sanitation is limited or scarce. So my artwork was highlighting this battle to attain water and just having access to essential needs, which require like to fight this virus. So I think during the lockdown and particularly within news and everything, we've kind of seen how these inequalities have taken place, and we become aware that these issues that shouldn't have been left for so long actually surfacing, and issues such as sanitation should have been addressed before. And even within schools and all of these just basic access to water, how are we supposed to tackle these issues by washing your hands if you don't have access to it, basically? And just highlighting how these people go out and they go distances just to get water to perform basic tasks. So yeah, our unsung heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, so much of the frontline workers, people who are there as cashiers, nurses, taxi drivers, bus drivers, taxi drivers are often vilified, but really, doing the work of farmers, of really getting us food and for the whole nation. And I think it's really about like how we create more equal and just societies. And as a young person, I'm interested in how you're thinking about the future. And I also will address this to Lindo, who does a lot of work around sort of past, present, and futures. But I'm wondering, how are you thinking about the future right now? Because I think that it's such a challenging moment. How do we create the kinds of futures that we want to see that are more equal and just?
So I guess at the moment particularly, we kind of see that the future is looking a little bit grim, just in terms of the fact that there's so much, like people are losing jobs and everything is just kind of seeming really intense. And I think the best thing at the moment as well would be to kind of like create our own opportunities, because I think as well, like by watching the news, we kind of see that this current epidemic kind of showed that with the government, there's still so much corruption happening and all of the displacement of funds. So I think as young people, our voices, and as artists as well, because art allows that space to kind of allow us to speak forward and allow issues to come forward. So I think what I would want, and I guess it's kind of like a utopian viewpoint as well, I would love to see less poverty or corruption and inequalities. But on a realistic level, I suppose just having a massive reduction of these and just creating jobs and focusing on not just drawing up policies, but seeing how to make these things implementable. So we need to shift mindsets and also just become more liberated in our thinking. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Angelique. Lindo, I'd like to move on to you. So your work was featured in the Lockdown Collection, the first iteration, I believe. And your work has largely focused on memory and the archive and how we think about the past and how it continues to haunt us in the present moment. During this COVID moment, where we've seen such a drastic sort of illumination of the inequalities that were already present. So COVID has kind of like highlighted and made it very clear where the cracks and fissures are. And these things are nothing new. And I always get concerned when people are saying, oh, we should return to normal, because it was never particularly normal. And as Angelique's work shows us, it was, deeply rooted in inequality. I'm wondering what you think that the role of art is in this moment in reflecting the pandemic, and how we will reflect on this moment through art in the future.
Okay, thanks for the question, Riflin. Hi to everyone. Well, I think a constant role within the arts, I think throughout history, number one, would always just to be documenting and reflecting on current times and all the issues that we find and look at and interrogate as artists. We hope that the leaders that we choose to lead the country or to lead this system that we so much support is that they would do justice as well. But then with this particular, I think, collection, what I've learned from it and what I think everyone can learn from it is that it is an actual system that was created by artists for artists, and it worked out in a very amazing way that everyone was willing to give into it and support it fully. And I think if we as individuals could always look into ourselves and selflessly and say, what can I give to help the other person, that would be a great start than this idea of just waiting on one person to do everything for all of us. I think what we've realized as individuals, or what I've realized, is that this idea of waiting is one of the reasons why we have so many gaps that we see now and that we're facing now, that no one can actually help themselves in this moment. And being isolated becomes a very strange thing where we don't know how to be with ourselves or how to react, actually. So I think the huge role in art is always depicting and documenting what our current situation is, and hope that the future generation will always look at and reflect on the works that we do and all these dialogues. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you did. Thank you very much. And I mean, I think you touched on something that's quite important as well, this idea of waiting, right? And the ideas of sort of like deceleration, which I think is also deeply linked to how we can think about who has the opportunity to decelerate, who has the opportunity to wait at home and be and work from home. And I think that that's something that's been quite highlighted throughout this conversation, is about, like, what is it that you can do right now with what you have? What communities of support and solidarity exist? And whilst also still balancing and recognizing the levels of privilege and access and opportunities that exist. I'm returning to what Kim had shared with us in where do we place our hope, and so much for me, hope is placed in these kinds of collections and in the ability for us to work together as a sector and as individual artists and creators to support each other. I want to open it up at this moment to the other people who are here. So you can place your questions in the chat if you have any additional questions. But Kim, I wanted to just sort of touch, come back to you as someone who was a co-founder of Artist Proof Studio and has done a lot of work across many years. And now with the artists and the student collection, seeing this collection, what is the role of intergenerational leadership and dialogue? And how do we ensure that we create solidarity across generational lines so that we can continue this work of consistent change and transformation? Is Kim here?
Yes, I am. Sorry. Thank you for that question, Rufilwe. I think it's one I'm very passionate about, this idea of intergenerational sort of crossing lines. And I think part of something we had a conversation with Gordon Froud, who's my colleague at UJ and who was the curator of the other extension collection, was the importance of mentorship, handing things over. I think our voices are very much tied into a specific context, an institutional context in many ways. And I think the magic of working with young people and young leaders is the vibrancy and vitality of new energy, new ideas, and that needs to have a space always. And I'm with Heidi on this one. I think teaching in this time has been really, really difficult during lockdown, but on the other hand, it's been incredibly inspiring, because when one is seeing so much inventiveness, so much innovation, and coming from young people, from artists who are looking, and I think what Linda was saying too, how he came through a system as a student and is now a role model, an educator, and becomes a person who pays it forward in many ways, and sees the value of knowing where he came from, how he can sort of have a bigger voice with his work and then give back to other artists, is a very inspiring thing. So it is a cycle of a generational cycle, and that we have a role to keep it alive. So I think that's what's, I think, exciting about this whole team as well.
And speaking of the team, I'd like to address that question to Renee as one of the project leads, I think, and also just in terms of putting this together, where to from here is the question that I'd like to ask you, and how do we work across generations, across different identity lines?
I mean, so the TLC started and ended, the campaign ended, but we still continued with the student portfolio. And I think it's a model that worked in terms of getting the younger generation to also voice out the experience in the pandemic. We had, in the beginning, the TLC had your big artists, professional artists, and now we have the student artists who are going to be the future leaders. So I think it's very important to look at young people in that sense that they are the leaders and they should be given the opportunity to voice their issues, their concerns, their hopes. And I think working on this project, I also learned during the process. I had a team of colleagues at Artist Proof Studio and also from the TLC, and it was frustrating at times, but I mean, I think the pandemic opened up a whole lot of opportunities for a lot of people, especially in the digital world. And now, when I think about it, a lot of young people are savvy with technology. So it's become this big opportunity for a lot of people to actually be out there, for artists to show their work, to share their work, and to just carry on making and creating. Yeah, so for me, I'm optimistic about the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Renile. And we have a beautiful comment from Gordon, who has said that he is pleased to have worked with Kim and Natsi to select the work of the student collection. And congratulations to all of you, and such great talent, also giving him hope. So thank you so much for that, Gordon. We have a question from Mark, who says that he's fascinated by Cynthia and Angelique's work, which incorporates reflective surfaces, Cynthia's mirrors, in which women gaze and seem to discover something about themselves, and the reflective surface of water in the pail in Angelique's work. Could Cynthia and Angelique perhaps share thoughts on what they discovered and what was reflected back to them in the process of creating these beautiful works? Cynthia, perhaps we could start with you.
Okay, for me, reflecting on the pandemic especially was, in terms of my work, I'll start with my work, is that I had a few weeks of like, just like a breakdown, not knowing what to write on or to work on. And so with like the support from like the teachers and from the APS team that helped us out during the pandemic, it really like showed like how much support can really do to somebody during a very difficult time. And also I've discovered like in terms of like creating a work, like the process has changed as like compared to how I used to work before, like putting pieces together to just make one artwork. And for me, it's meaningful in its own way of like how different things that come from different places, how when they put together, they can communicate something, and to other people, how they read it or receive it. They might receive the, how can I put this? They might receive it to a very, how can I put this? Sorry. So it's all on a, like a very reflective surface of like everyone reflecting on like the same situation that's going around, but in that different ways, if that makes sense.
It does.
So that was the reflecting part for me. Yeah, it's just like the different experiences that people have with this experience, and then for an artist like me speaking on a particular issue, and then for somebody else to receive it in a particular way, shows that like the process that I went through and the support that I have has really showed power in what I do. And like in terms of like reflecting on myself and the power that I have and the voice that I have. So that for me was like the reflection part of it.
Thank you for sharing that. And Angelique, could you also share on what was reflected back to you through creating this process, through your creative process?
I think just going through everything, particularly through this lockdown, in a way, you started to feel a lot of anxiety. In the beginning, I think it started off and we were all like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And we were very hopeful. And as things moved forward, we kind of felt like that sense of anxiety that kept on growing. And I think within my work, particularly when I was working with it, it became very meditative. And how I work is I generally do like to use materials that are accessible to me. So using soap and maybe like the blood from what I had like from our meat and whatever, and integrating it. It was just a way of me using what I had available as well in my space, and using repurposed materials as well, just to speak about this message, and just also addressing the idea of, I think what stood out to me so much was just this whole process of like how not everybody has access to sanitation, and it really affected me knowing that there's so many people who are facing so much struggles. And I think like just in terms as well with the vulnerable artists, just to go a bit sidetrack, just everything that they've done just to help people who don't have access to just basic things during this time when we lost, like a lot of families lost jobs, or you couldn't go out and actually work to get money in. The fact that they supplied us with money to pay for electricity or to create works is something that I think a lot of people are very appreciative for. And just seeing that sense of humanity that's coming forward in like a lot of different spaces. And as you said, the fact that like people who work like at the front line, they come out. So this hand, I think it can be interpreted in a sense from multiple perspectives. I see it as the woman, as Mark Oslander said it so beautifully in this article that he wrote, this woman who goes forward and supplies for her family. And I think that was something that struck me, that somebody else could connect to what I'm saying, and maybe somebody else might have a different interpretation of it. And just that sense of humanity, I wondered whether it still existed. And through this lockdown, you kind of saw, oh, people are actually still banding together. And I guess it gives you a sense of upliftment and hope. And I guess we will all experience a bit of grief in the sense of maybe through interaction, loss of interaction or jobs and so forth. So knowing that people still care and there are places to reach out is really encouraging. And I think even though my work is a bit weighted, I guess I try and do it in a way that still has that lightness. And I think that's what I try to do with the fact with the sculpture balancing. It's almost, is it going to fall over? But there's still that weird sense of how's it still staying up? And I think it's just the encouragement of these really strong people who keep going forward. I hope I answered the question, but yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have two last questions, which are kind of the same, and I'll bring them together, which are questions to the educators around educating during these trying times. And what does art education look like, particularly in terms of curriculum, but also making this transition to digital and online training? What are we missing, and what are the things that educators and artists could be focusing on in this moment in terms of continuous development in the arts? So,
Okay,
Heidi and Renee.
I'll go. I mean, like Heidi was saying, we had to use the resources that we have. So I think starting with the resources that you have and knowing the students that you are teaching is the first step. So we've been using WhatsApp, and we'd had to teach the students how to document their work. So a simple thing like taking a picture of their work, it has to be in a certain way, you know, so we had to teach them how to do that. As much as they know social media, they're in the digital world, but there are other skills that they can learn about the digital world. So we've been teaching them tips and things that they can do to also apply to other opportunities like Vulnerable Artist Fund and other funding that's out there. And what else? And also adjusting the curriculum in a way that makes sense digitally. So having to relook at what the current curriculum is and adjusting our lessons, and also not having to think about the deliverables. So being realistic about it, and also thinking about the spaces that the students are working in. They're very different. They're working from home. Some of them might not have a desk to work on, and they might be working on the floor or on their beds. So it's things like that to consider when you think about teaching online. Yeah. Heidi.
And I think I can add to Renee what is and this I think is a looking at our country, what with data being something that is considered a luxury is becoming a necessity for education. And the high levels of data and being very reliant on that, you know, and making sure that your students are able to connect is one of the big things and one of the challenges that we as educators have had to try to think about. And that you can't necessarily have a classroom or a Zoom kind of meeting because not necessarily all of your students will have data at that same time. So that for us was very challenging. And just looking at Artist Proof, our curriculum is a little bit different to maybe the arts education. So I think maybe Kim could comment on that more, because we are able to, we're very flexible at Artist Proof, and we're able to really switch lanes quickly and able to adjust our curriculum to the situation. So for example, being the second year coordinator, we were going into etching. Etching is a technique in printmaking that's very reliant on a press and being in the studio. So, and that's the practicality of it. So I had to switch gears and say, okay, they're not going to be able to come into the studio. What are their needs? What can I hone in on that they can do at home from the luxury, using things that were around them? And really just also, but at the same time, being very, very specific about my outcomes and knowing that I wanted them to improve on drawing and really getting, so it still remained within the etching curriculum, but the exercises were about how to get them ready for etching. So with the pretense that we will be coming back to the studio, which we are still planning on coming to the studio, we're just looking very carefully at the levels in Joburg. So at the moment we're saying no, but once it's safe, or if it is safe, we'll let students in, but under very strict protocols. But you know, so the lessons have always been about trying to prepare them for it. But I think I'm answering how we adapted the curriculum. I'm not too sure how the universities have. I think they've done similar strategies. But yeah, I think Kim could answer that a lot better than me, because yeah. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Heidi. With the last 6 minutes, though, I would like to just maybe get some closing comments. So Kim, maybe we'll start with you, and you can maybe just also touch a little bit on the curriculum question as an educator at the University of Johannesburg as well.
Thank you. I think I mentioned that one of the challenges has been innovation. I mean, I ended up talking to my printmaking students at UJ about how to make paper, how to make ink, how to make your colors using, you know, plants, using curries. People have done amazing drawings, work, and in fact, some of the students have come up with little PDF exercises how to teach materials, and that's been really interesting, and how everybody's adapted and come up with very innovative ways of teaching skills and creativity. And I guess my comment really would be that this is, how do you look at this as a new opportunity for education? What kinds of transformation can happen that can be very inclusive and not just very elitist to students who have resources, and what can be made from that? So I think that'll be,
Thanks, Kim.
From there.
So as we show a couple of images from the rest of the collection, Lindo, do you have any closing comments?
Nothing, just it's great to see students doing this collection and just giving back to the fund for other artists that may be in need. And I think we need more of this initiative where we're doing things for ourselves instead of waiting for this big figure that's supposed to come and help out.
Thank you so much for that, Linda. Angelique?
I just also want to thank the Lockdown Collection just for allowing us as artists to come together and allow our stories and our voices to be heard. And it's just an incredible opportunity as well, just to see and share experiences with fellow artists and see how they've experienced this lockdown. And yeah, just thank you for allowing me to speak as well.
Thank you for being here. Cynthia, any last comments from you?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, and that what I've taken from this is that there is danger in the comfort zone, but with the pressure, there is power in that.
It's a beautiful way to end off. Heidi, any last comments before I go to Renele?
I just think I want to thank the students, and for those of them that are watching, hi. But yeah, I think that I'm very proud of them. I'm very, very proud of what our students have accomplished, and to keep up the good spirits and know that we're holding you and supporting you and trying our hardest to get the students making some really cool work. So engaging and innovative things. So I think it's very hopeful, and yeah, I'm very excited. So thank you to everything.
Thanks, Heidi. And Renele?
I'd like to thank Banza and Rufilo for hosting us, the TLC team and the APS team, and to all the students, well done. And thank you everyone for watching. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm just sharing and reiterating the sentiments of all the panelists, but a very special thank you to the panelists for joining us today. The session will be available to all of you via the Facebook, Vanza Facebook page, and you're welcome to come and watch it again and direct people to it. As a reminder, you can view and support the Lockdown Collection, the student collection, via Artist Proof Studio website, where 10 limited edition digital prints of each artist's work are available for purchase, which you can see right now, between 1,300 Rand to 1,800 Rand. All of the proceeds from the sale of the prints will go to the artists to support them in this time, as well as to the SA Solidarity Fund and the Vulnerable Visual Artist Fund. Also, the Vulnerable Visual Artist Fund is open again, which is really great news, to first-time applicants, and we will post a link to that, as Kim mentioned, on our website and also on the APS website. So you can follow the Lockdown Collection and Artist Proof Studios on all social media, and you can follow hashtag TLC Student Collection for more information. Really, let's support these young and amazing dynamic artists. Thank you for everyone, to everyone for joining us. Please stay safe, stay well, stay healthy, and be well. Take care.
Thank you, Rufilo.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much, everybody.
Everyone.